Sarah Mitchell had always been underestimated. At 5 feet 4 inches tall with auburn hair and gentle green eyes, she looked more like a librarian than someone who could handle herself in dangerous situations. But appearances, as many would soon learn, could be devastatingly deceiving. Working as a systems analyst for a major defense contractor in San Diego, Sarah spent her days buried in computer code and security protocols. Her colleagues saw her as the quiet woman who brought homemade cookies to office meetings and never raised her voice during heated project discussions. What they didn't know was that Sarah had spent 4 years in military intelligence before transitioning to civilian life, and her seemingly innocent hobby of evening jogs was actually intensive physical training she maintained religiously. The trouble began on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning in October. Sarah arrived at the Meridian Defense Systems building at her usual time, 7:30 a.m., carrying her laptop bag and a thermos of coffee. The parking garage was nearly empty, just a few early arrivals like herself. She badged into the elevator and rode up to the 15th floor, where her department occupied the entire level. Something felt off the moment she stepped out of the elevator. The hallway was too quiet, and the usual hum of early morning activity was absent. Sarah's military training kicked in immediately. Her senses heightened as she noticed scuff marks on the polished floor and a door that should have been locked standing slightly ajar. Moving carefully down the corridor, she heard muffled voices coming from the main server room. Through the partially open door, she could see 3 men in dark clothing hunched over computer terminals. They weren't wearing company badges, and their movements suggested they were in a hurry. One of them was downloading files onto an external drive, while another kept watch. Sarah's heart rate increased, but her breathing remained controlled. She recognized the signs of corporate espionage, something she had been trained to identify and counter during her military service. These weren't random thieves looking for computers to steal. They were professionals after classified defense information that could be worth millions on the black market or, worse, could compromise national security. Quietly retreating to her cubicle, Sarah accessed her secure phone and sent a coded message to building security. But she knew response time could be crucial, and every minute these intruders remained in the system increased the potential damage. The files they were accessing contained blueprints for advanced radar systems used by the Navy and Air Force. The men had clearly studied the building's security protocols. They had disabled several cameras and seemed to know exactly which systems to target. Sarah watched from her hidden position as they worked with professional efficiency, communicating through hand signals and wireless earpieces. One of the intruders, a tall man with a distinctive scar across his left cheek, appeared to be the leader. He directed the others with quiet authority while monitoring multiple computer screens simultaneously. Sarah memorized every detail of his appearance, her military intelligence training making her an excellent observer. As minutes ticked by, Sarah realized that building security might not arrive in time. The intruders were moving faster than anticipated, and she could see they were already copying terabytes of sensitive data. The thought of classified defense information falling into the wrong hands made her stomach tighten with anxiety and determination. Drawing on her training, Sarah began to formulate a plan. She knew the building's layout better than the intruders did, having worked there for 3 years. More importantly, she understood the computer systems they were trying to penetrate. If she could access a terminal in another location, she might be able to slow down their operation or trigger additional security protocols. Moving silently through the office space, Sarah made her way to the backup control room on the opposite side of the floor. Her hands moved quickly across the keyboard as she accessed the building's internal security network. Within minutes, she had identified the specific terminals the intruders were using and began implementing countermeasures. The first thing she did was subtly slow down their download speeds by redirecting network traffic. To the intruders, it would appear as normal system lag, but it would buy precious time for security to arrive. Next, she began copying their activities onto a secure backup server, ensuring that evidence of their intrusion would be preserved even if they managed to escape. Through the internal camera system, Sarah watched the intruders grow increasingly frustrated as their operation began to encounter unexpected delays. The leader checked his watch repeatedly and spoke urgently into his earpiece. They were clearly working against a tight timeline. Sarah's military experience had taught her that patience and precision often triumphed over haste and force. While the intruders grew more agitated, she remained calm and methodical, continuing to implement subtle obstacles to their mission. She rerouted their access attempts to dummy files that appeared legitimate but contained no actual classified information. The breakthrough came when Sarah discovered that the intruders had planted a sophisticated virus designed to cover their tracks by corrupting the very files they were stealing. This wasn't just theft, it was sabotage intended to cripple the company's defense projects. The realization made Sarah's blood run cold. These weren't ordinary criminals, but operatives engaged in what amounted to an act of war against American defense capabilities. With this knowledge, Sarah's approach shifted from merely slowing down the intruders to actively hunting them through the digital landscape. She began tracing their network connections, following digital breadcrumbs back to their source. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she penetrated their security protocols with the same skill they had used to breach the building's systems. What she discovered made her realize the true scope of what she was facing. The intrusion was just one part of a coordinated attack on multiple defense contractors across the country. The men in the server room were part of a larger network of operatives working to steal and destroy critical defense information. Sarah knew she was now engaged in something far more serious than corporate espionage. She was fighting to protect national security, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The quiet systems analyst had become a digital warrior, using her skills to defend her country from an invisible enemy. As she continued her counter-operation, Sarah noticed movement in the hallway outside the backup control room. One of the intruders had left the server room and was systematically checking other areas of the floor. Her heart pounded as she realized they might have detected her interference with their operation. The man was getting closer to her location, moving with the careful precision of someone trained in combat operations. Sarah knew that her cover was about to be blown, and she would soon face a direct confrontation with dangerous adversaries who wouldn't hesitate to use violence to protect their mission. Looking around the small control room, Sarah assessed her options. There were few places to hide, and only one exit that would take her directly past the approaching intruder. Her military training had prepared her for situations like this, but it had been years since she had faced real physical danger. Sarah took a deep breath and made a decision that would change everything. Instead of hiding or attempting to escape, she would stand her ground and fight. The men who had invaded her workplace and threatened her country's security were about to discover that they had severely underestimated the quiet woman with the gentle eyes and homemade cookies. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test every skill Sarah had learned in military service and every ounce of courage she possessed. The intruders had made a critical error in assuming that a civilian office building would contain only helpless victims. They were about to face someone who refused to be a victim and who possessed the training and determination to fight back against overwhelming odds. As footsteps approached the control room door, Sarah prepared herself for what was to come, knowing that the next few minutes would determine not just her own fate, but the security of classified information that could affect the safety of every American soldier, sailor, and airman serving their country around the world. The door to the backup control room creaked open slowly. Sarah held her breath as the barrel of a pistol appeared first, followed by the careful emergence of the intruder. He was younger than the leader, maybe in his late 20s, with the lean build of someone who stayed in excellent physical condition. His eyes swept the room methodically before settling on Sarah, who had positioned herself behind a bank of computer servers. Well, he said in accented English, his voice carrying a hint of Eastern European origins. Looks like we have a curious little mouse who couldn't mind her own business. Sarah remained perfectly still, her heart hammering but her breathing controlled. The man approached cautiously, keeping his weapon trained on her while speaking into his wireless earpiece in what sounded like Russian. She caught enough words to understand that he was reporting the discovery of a civilian witness to his team leader. "You're going to come with me," he continued, gesturing with the pistol toward the door. "Nice and quiet, and maybe you lived through this morning." Instead of complying, Sarah slowly raised her hands in apparent surrender while carefully calculating distances and angles. The man relaxed slightly, assuming she was just a frightened office worker who would follow orders. It was exactly the reaction she had hoped for. In one fluid movement that drew on years of combat training, Sarah dove to her left while sweeping a heavy computer monitor off the desk toward her captor. The man, caught off guard by the sudden action, fired reflexively, but his shot went wide as he tried to dodge the flying equipment. Sarah rolled behind a sturdy metal filing cabinet as the intruder recovered and advanced on her position. She could hear him speaking rapidly into his earpiece, undoubtedly calling for backup. The element of surprise was gone, but she had gained crucial intelligence about their numbers and positions. "You just made a very big mistake," the man called out, his earlier casual confidence replaced by anger. "My associates don't like complications." From her concealed position, Sarah could hear the distinctive sound of additional footsteps in the hallway. The other intruders were coming to investigate the gunshot. She knew she had only seconds before being surrounded and overwhelmed. Drawing on her knowledge of the building's layout, Sarah opened the filing cabinet and quickly removed several heavy binders. She hurled them one after another toward the room's light fixtures, plunging the space into near darkness. In the confusion that followed, she slipped out through the room's secondary exit, a maintenance door that most people didn't even notice. The narrow maintenance corridor ran between the building's inner and outer walls, providing access to electrical and computer systems. Sarah had discovered it during her first month at the company and had occasionally used it as a quiet place to think through complex problems. Now it would serve as her highway through hostile territory. Moving through the cramped space, Sarah could hear the intruders searching the control room and surrounding offices. Their leader's voice carried through the walls, speaking in rapid Russian punctuated by occasional English curse words. They were clearly frustrated by her escape and were expanding their search throughout the entire floor. Sarah emerged from the maintenance corridor near the emergency stairwell, where she paused to assess the situation. Through a small window in the stairwell door, she could see two of the intruders moving systematically through the office space, checking every potential hiding spot. They had split up to cover more ground, which might give her an advantage. Her military training had emphasized the importance of gathering intelligence before engaging the enemy. Sarah needed to understand exactly what she was facing before making her next move. Using her knowledge of the building's security systems, she accessed a maintenance terminal and pulled up the camera feeds from throughout the floor. What she saw confirmed her worst fears. There weren't just 3 intruders as she had initially thought, but 5. 2 additional men had entered the building while she was dealing with the first group. They were positioned at strategic locations to prevent anyone from entering or leaving the floor, while the others continued their data theft operation. The new arrivals were clearly more experienced and better equipped than the younger man she had encountered in the control room. They moved with military precision and carried sophisticated weapons and communication equipment. Sarah realized she was facing a professional team of operatives, not ordinary criminals. Through the camera system, she watched the leader directing his team with hand signals and precise tactical movements. They had taken control of the entire floor and were methodically securing their operation while searching for her. The youngest member of the team, the one she had evaded in the control room, seemed to be receiving harsh criticism for allowing a civilian to escape. Sarah knew she couldn't simply hide and wait for security to arrive. The intruders were working too quickly, and she could see through the cameras that they were already approaching the most sensitive files in the company's database. Every minute they remained in the system brought them closer to obtaining information that could compromise ongoing military operations around the world. Making a difficult decision, Sarah left the relative safety of the stairwell and began moving through the office space using a route she had planned based on the camera feeds. Her goal was to reach the primary server room where she could implement more aggressive countermeasures against the data theft. The journey required her to move like a ghost through familiar territory that had suddenly become a battlefield. She used her intimate knowledge of the office layout to avoid the intruders' patrol routes, moving silently through cubicle rows and conference rooms. As she approached the server room, Sarah could hear the distinctive sounds of high-speed data transfer and the quiet conversation of the remaining intruders. They were so focused on their technical operation that they had posted only minimal security, assuming their colleagues would handle any external threats. Sarah positioned herself where she could observe the server room without being seen. The leader and one associate were inside, working at multiple computer terminals simultaneously. They had connected several external storage devices and were downloading files at an incredible rate. The progress indicators on their screens showed they were more than halfway through copying the classified database. Through the doorway, Sarah could see sophisticated equipment that hadn't been visible during her earlier observation. The intruders had brought professional-grade hacking tools and appeared to have inside knowledge of the company's security protocols. This wasn't a random attack, but a carefully planned operation that had been months in the making. The realization that there might be an inside collaborator made Sarah's blood boil. Someone with legitimate access had provided these operatives with the information they needed to penetrate the building's defenses. The betrayal felt personal, as if a family member had sold out their own relatives. Sarah began implementing her plan to disrupt the data theft. Using a portable device she carried for system maintenance, she accessed the building's environmental controls and began subtly manipulating the temperature and humidity in the server room. It would appear to be a minor system malfunction, but it would force the intruders to work faster or risk damaging their equipment. Next, she accessed the power management system and began introducing small fluctuations in electrical current to the servers. Again, it would seem like normal building infrastructure issues, but it would slow down data transfer rates and potentially corrupt some of the files being stolen. The intruders noticed the environmental changes almost immediately. Sarah watched through the doorway as they checked their equipment and spoke urgently to each other. The leader barked orders into his earpiece, demanding that his team complete the operation quickly before system problems could interfere with their mission. Sarah's subtle sabotage was working, but she knew it would only buy limited time. The intruders were too professional to be stopped by minor technical difficulties. She needed to take more direct action, which would mean revealing her position and engaging in open conflict with trained operatives who outnumbered her 5-1. As she prepared for her next move, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed in just a few hours. That morning, she had been a quiet systems analyst looking forward to another routine day at the office. Now she was engaged in what amounted to guerrilla warfare against foreign operatives attempting to steal classified military secrets. The thought of American soldiers whose lives might be endangered by the stolen information strengthened Sarah's resolve. She had sworn an oath to protect her country during her military service, and that oath didn't end just because she now wore civilian clothes and worked in an office building instead of a battlefield. Sarah checked her watch and realized that security should be arriving soon. But the intruders were working faster than ever, spurred by the system problems she had created. It was going to be a race against time, with national security hanging in the balance. The quiet woman who baked cookies for office meetings was about to launch an all-out assault against professional operatives. They had made the mistake of underestimating her once. Sarah was determined to ensure they didn't get a second chance to learn from their error. The moment Sarah decided to take direct action, everything changed. She moved through the office like a predator who had finally chosen to reveal herself to her prey. Years of suppressed military instincts surged to the surface as she approached the server room where two intruders continued their data theft operation. Sarah had noticed a pattern in their behavior through her surveillance. Every few minutes, one of them would step away from the terminals to check their progress or communicate with the other team members. She waited for the next opportunity, timing her approach perfectly. When the leader's associate moved toward the doorway to update his colleagues, Sarah struck. She appeared behind him like a shadow, wrapping her arm around his throat in a sleeper hold she had perfected during her military training. The man struggled briefly before losing consciousness and collapsing silently to the floor. The leader, still focused on his computer screens, called out without turning around. "Victor, how much longer do you think we need?" Sarah picked up Victor's earpiece and spoke in a low voice she hoped would pass for his colleague. 5 more minutes, maybe less." "Good. The others are getting nervous about staying here too long." Sarah quickly searched Victor's unconscious form and found a pistol and several pieces of equipment. She also discovered something that made her blood run cold, a small explosive device with a timer. The intruders weren't just planning to steal the data. They intended to destroy the entire server room to cover their tracks. Moving silently to the doorway, Sarah observed the leader hunched over multiple computer terminals. He was older than the others, probably in his 40s, with graying hair and the confident posture of someone accustomed to command. Several external hard drives were connected to the servers, their progress bars showing the massive data transfer was nearly complete. Sarah knew she had only one chance to stop him before he completed the theft or activated the explosive device. Drawing on every ounce of training and determination she possessed, she stepped into the server room. "Step away from the computers," she commanded, pointing Victor's pistol at the leader. The man turned slowly, his face showing surprise followed quickly by calculation. He looked her up and down, taking in her civilian clothing and slight build. "Ah, the little mouse reveals herself," he said in accented English, his voice calm despite the weapon trained on him. "I am impressed you made it this far, but you are out of your depth now." "The only thing I'm out of is patience," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Move away from those terminals, now." Instead of complying, the leader smiled coldly. "Do you know what you are interfering with? This information will save Russian lives and advance the cause of justice in the world. Your American military uses this technology to oppress innocent people." "Save the propaganda," Sarah shot back. "The only thing you're accomplishing is putting American soldiers at risk." The leader's expression hardened. "Those soldiers choose to serve an imperialist nation. Their fate is not my concern." As he spoke, Sarah noticed his hand moving slowly towards something on the desk behind him. She realized with horror that he was reaching for the detonator for the explosive device. "Don't even think about it," she warned, adjusting her aim. "You won't shoot," the leader said confidently. "You're not a killer. I can see it in your eyes." He was partially right. Sarah had never killed anyone during her military service, having worked in intelligence rather than combat operations. But he was wrong about her resolve. "You're right that I'm not a killer," Sarah said quietly. "But I am a soldier, and you're threatening my country." The leader lunged for the detonator just as Sarah fired. Her shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing into the computer equipment. Alarms began blaring as the gunshot triggered the building's security systems. Despite his wound, the leader was far from finished. He rolled behind a bank of servers and produced his own weapon, returning fire as Sarah dove for cover. Bullets shattered computer monitors and sent sparks flying from damaged equipment. "You have delayed the inevitable," the leader called out between shots. "My team will complete the mission even if I do not survive." Sarah knew he was right. Even if she stopped him, the other operatives were still active throughout the building. She needed to find a way to stop the entire operation, not just one man. As the gunfight continued, Sarah heard heavy footsteps in the hallway outside. The other intruders were responding to the gunfire, moving to support their leader. She would soon be surrounded and overwhelmed. That's when she heard something that changed everything. The distinctive sound of tactical boots moving with military precision. But these weren't the intruders' footsteps. These belonged to someone else, someone whose movement patterns suggested advanced combat training. The gunfire in the hallway that followed was brief, but intense. Sarah heard shouts in Russian followed by the sound of bodies hitting the floor. When silence fell, a new voice called out in clear American English. "Ma'am, this is Petty Officer Marcus Chun, United States Navy. Are you injured?" Sarah had never been so relieved to hear another human voice. "I'm okay, but there's a wounded hostile in here with me, and he's got a detonator for an explosive device. Can you contain him for another 30 seconds? "I can try." What followed was the most intense 30 seconds of Sarah's life. The wounded leader, realizing that his mission was failing, made a desperate attempt to detonate the explosive and destroy the evidence of the theft. Sarah engaged him in close-quarters combat that drew on every defensive technique she had learned in the military. They struggled over the detonator as computer equipment crashed around them. The leader was larger and stronger, but Sarah was more agile and had the advantage of fighting for something she believed in. When Petty Officer Chun burst through the doorway, he found Sarah pinning the leader to the floor with the detonator safely out of his reach. Chun was exactly what Sarah had expected a Navy SEAL to look like: tall, powerfully built, and moving with the fluid confidence of someone comfortable with violence. His tactical gear and weapons suggested he was part of a specialized counterterrorism unit. "Outstanding work, ma'am," Chun said as he secured the wounded leader with zip ties. "You've probably saved a lot of lives today." Sarah stood up slowly, adrenaline still coursing through her system. "How did you know to come here?" Military intelligence picked up chatter about coordinated attacks on defense contractors. My team was dispatched to respond, but we expected to find civilian casualties, not someone fighting back. As Chen spoke, other tactical team members appeared in the doorway, reporting that all intruders had been neutralized and the building was secure. Sarah learned that the attack had indeed been part of a larger operation targeting multiple defense facilities across the country. The explosive device, Sarah said suddenly, remembering the immediate danger. Chen examined the device quickly. It's sophisticated, but my demolitions expert can handle it. You probably saved this entire building by preventing him from triggering it. As the tactical team worked to secure the scene, Sarah finally had a moment to process what had happened. In the span of a few hours, she had gone from systems analyst to counterintelligence operative to combat veteran. The quiet woman who preferred working behind the scenes had been forced to step into the spotlight and fight for her country's security. Chen approached her as medics treated the wounded leader. I've been briefed on what you accomplished here today. Taking on a team of professional operatives by yourself was either incredibly brave or completely insane. Probably a little of both, Sarah admitted. The intelligence community is going to want to debrief you extensively. What you learned about their methods and equipment could be crucial for preventing future attacks. Sarah nodded, already thinking about the implications of what she had witnessed. The attack had been too sophisticated and well-informed to be the work of ordinary criminals or even typical foreign intelligence operatives. Someone with extensive knowledge of American defense contractors had provided inside information to make this operation possible. As she watched Chen's team methodically document the scene and collect evidence, Sarah realized that her involvement in this crisis was far from over. The intruders had been stopped, but the larger threat they represented was still out there, planning and preparing for their next attack. The systems analyst who had always worked behind the scenes was about to be thrust into a world of international espionage and counterterrorism operations. The people who had underestimated her quiet nature and civilian appearance were about to discover that they had awakened something they weren't prepared to handle. 3 weeks after the attack on Meridian Defense Systems, Sarah Mitchell sat in a secure conference room at the Naval Intelligence Headquarters in San Diego. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of debriefings, security assessments, and classified briefings that had fundamentally changed her understanding of the threats facing her country. Across the table sat Petty Officer Marcus Chun, now dressed in service dress blues rather than tactical gear. Beside him were 2 senior intelligence officers, and a woman introduced only as Agent Rodriguez from an unnamed federal agency. The room's windows were covered with security blinds, and electronic devices hummed quietly to prevent any possibility of surveillance. Ms. Mitchell, began Captain Sarah Williams, the senior Navy intelligence officer. Your actions 3 weeks ago not only prevented a significant security breach, but also provided us with intelligence that has led to the disruption of a major foreign espionage network. Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her chair. The praise felt surreal given that she still thought of herself as just a systems analyst who had been in the wrong place at the right time. The explosive device you prevented from being detonated, continued Agent Rodriguez, was designed not just to destroy evidence, but to kill anyone who might have witnessed the operation. The foreign operatives were prepared to commit mass murder to protect their mission. We've been tracking this particular cell for over a year, added the second intelligence officer, Commander Jackson. They've been responsible for successful penetrations of 3 other defense contractors, stealing information that has already compromised ongoing military operations overseas. Chen leaned forward, his expression serious. What made this operation different was that they finally encountered someone who fought back effectively. Your background in military intelligence, combined with your current position and your refusal to be intimidated, created a perfect storm that destroyed their mission. Sarah learned that the investigation had uncovered far more than just a simple espionage operation. The foreign operatives had been part of a sophisticated network that included several American citizens who had been providing inside information about defense contractors' security procedures and classified projects. The individual you subdued in the server room has been cooperating with our investigation, Agent Rodriguez explained. His information has led to arrests across 3 states and the prevention of at least 4 additional planned attacks. More importantly, Captain Williams added, the computer equipment and storage devices you helped us capture contained information about the entire network structure and methods. We've been able to roll up operations that were years in the making. Sarah felt a mix of pride and concern as she absorbed this information. Are there still active threats out there? Always, Chen replied honestly. But this particular network has been severely degraded. More importantly, your actions have led to significant improvements in security protocols at defense contractors nationwide. The meeting continued for over an hour as the intelligence officers briefed Sarah on the broader implications of what she had stumbled into. The foreign operatives hadn't just been stealing current defense information, but also trying to identify and recruit additional sources within the American defense industry. "We have a proposition for you," Captain Williams said as the formal briefing concluded. "Your combination of technical expertise, military intelligence background, and proven ability to perform under pressure makes you an ideal candidate for a position with our counterintelligence division." Sarah was stunned. "You're offering me a job?" "We're offering you a chance to serve your country in a capacity that could prevent future attacks like the one you stopped," Agent Rodriguez clarified. "The threats are evolving, and we need people who understand both the technical and human elements of modern espionage." Chen smiled for the first time during the meeting. "You've already proven you can handle the pressure. The question is whether you want to make fighting these threats your full-time mission." Sarah thought about her quiet life as a systems analyst, her comfortable routine, and the sense of security she had felt before that October morning when everything changed. Then, she thought about the American soldiers whose lives had been endangered by the stolen information and the foreign operatives who had been willing to commit murder to advance their mission. "What would this position involve?" she asked. "You'd be working directly with teams like mine," Chen explained. "Part technical analysis, part field operations, all focused on identifying and stopping threats to national security before they can cause damage." "It wouldn't be easy," Captain Williams warned. "You'd be dealing with people who see you as an enemy to be eliminated, not just a problem to be solved. The stakes would always be high, and there would be no guarantee of a normal personal life." Sarah considered the offer carefully. The events of 3 weeks ago had awakened something in her that she hadn't felt since leaving the military. The sense of purpose, the knowledge that her actions could make a real difference in protecting her country and her fellow citizens. "The people who attacked our building," Sarah said finally, "they underestimated me because I looked like someone who couldn't fight back. How many other attacks succeed because the people planning them make similar assumptions?" "More than we'd like to admit," Agent Rodriguez replied. "Foreign intelligence services often focus on what they consider hard targets while overlooking individuals who might actually be more capable of stopping them. They saw a quiet woman in civilian clothes and assumed I was helpless," Sarah continued. "But they were wrong about who I really was underneath the surface appearance." Chen nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need. The ability to see past appearances and understand the real capabilities and threats we're facing." Sarah made her decision. "I accept the position." The smile that crossed Captain Williams' face was the first genuinely warm expression Sarah had seen from her. "Welcome to the team, Agent Mitchell." The next several months were filled with intensive training that pushed Sarah to her physical and mental limits. She learned advanced combat techniques, sophisticated surveillance methods, and cutting-edge counterintelligence protocols. Most importantly, she learned how to blend her technical expertise with fieldwork in ways that made her uniquely effective against modern threats. Her first major assignment came 6 months later when intelligence indicated that another foreign espionage cell was planning to target a defense contractor in Phoenix. This time, however, Sarah wouldn't be a surprised civilian fighting to protect her workplace. She would be a federal agent with full authority and support, working alongside Chen's SEAL team to prevent the attack before it could begin. As she prepared for the mission, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed since that October morning. The quiet systems analyst who had been underestimated by everyone, including herself, had become someone who could no longer be overlooked or dismissed. The final operation in Phoenix went flawlessly. The foreign operatives, expecting to find helpless civilian targets, instead walked into a carefully prepared trap. Sarah watched from her command position as Chen's team, now including her as a full member, systematically dismantled the espionage cell before they could steal a single file. Standing in the secured facility afterward, Sarah thought about all the American service members who would remain safe because of their actions. She thought about the defense contractors who could continue their work without fear of foreign infiltration. Most of all, she thought about how much she had discovered about her own capabilities when circumstances demanded everything she could give. The woman who had once been content to work quietly behind the scenes had become someone who stood on the front lines of protecting national security. The people who had underestimated her had learned a painful lesson about the danger of judging others by their appearance rather than their character and capabilities. Agent Rodriguez approached as the team prepared to leave the scene. Outstanding work, Agent Mitchell. You've come a long way from that morning in San Diego. Sarah smiled, feeling the satisfaction that came from a mission completed successfully. I think I was always capable of this. I just needed the right circumstances to discover it. The best agents usually are people who surprise themselves, Chen added. People who find strength they didn't know they possessed when their country needs it most. As they left the building, Sarah knew that there would be other missions, other threats, and other opportunities to serve her country. The quiet woman who had been underestimated had found her true calling as someone who could no longer be underestimated by anyone. The foreign operatives who had targeted American defense contractors had made a critical error in judgment. They had assumed that civilians would be helpless victims who could be easily intimidated or eliminated. Instead, they had awakened a protector who would spend the rest of her career ensuring that their assumptions proved costly and their missions ended in failure. Agent Sarah Mitchell, formerly just a systems analyst, had become exactly what her country needed. Someone who looked like an ordinary citizen but possessed the skills, determination, and courage to stand against any threat to American security. The people who underestimated her had learned that appearances could be deceiving, and that lesson would serve as a warning to anyone else who might consider threatening the people she had sworn to protect.